Hey everyone, thought I'd do a special edition regarding the Trump policies and the tariffs. I wanted to do this like a month ago, but thought it would be too fear-mongering. Unfortunately, kind of everything came true, and now it's time to talk about it. So, first things first, Trump is a moron. His claims that other countries are taking advantage of the US are stupid and not true. The US holds the world reserve currency in the dollar. It is virtually impossible to not have trade deficits as the world reserve currency holder because everyone wants your currency and they sell to you more than you sell to them. That is because they want dollars. They use dollars as reserves as well. They use dollars for international trade, like for example, a petrodollar. Most transactions with the on oil are done in dollars, so everyone needs dollars. Because of that, you have the privilege of getting stuff for paper. Like the US has been printing dollars for decades. You press a button, metaphorically speaking, and you print dollars, which you give to other countries for stuff. And who wins out of that? Does the country that gives you their stuff for paper, basically? Or do you win because you gave them paper and they gave you their stuff? I think the US is the winner here. And it's a feature, not a bug, that you have trade deficits, and you will never not be able to not have trade deficits as the world currency holder. And for example, all that talk about the BRICS country currency undermining the dollar is nonsense, because one of the BRICS countries would have to accept huge trade deficits. And this will strengthen their currency. This will hurt their trade. Like a weak currency is better for exports. A strong currency is worse for exports because relative to other stuff, other currencies, your currency will be valued more. So when you sell your stuff, you get less of your money. When they buy your stuff, they pay less of their money to get your stuff. And on top of this, what happens in world reserve currency holders is they transition from low level work like cloud manufacturing, coal mining, I don't know, some of the old industries, and they transition to high level work. Like instead of uh, making clothes, you have the ability to do stuff like Mac 7. You go into high tech, you do car manufacturing, and so on. So you do very value adding products that cost a lot of money, and you export them to other countries, and you lose your low level work base basically because this happens naturally because because the currency is strong. It's very costly to do internally, or at least a lot more costly than exporting this to another country and just importing the raw goods. For let's take coal, for example. It's very expensive to mine coal in the US because you have to pay workers a lot, plus protections, blah blah blah, etc. But if you buy it from another country, it's a lot cheaper to do that than to mine it locally. And when this happens over time, there's a lack of knowledge and willingness to do the low level work because people see that high level work pays a lot more, is a lot less stressful or demanding physically, and so on. So they don't have the knowledge to do the low level work. And believe it or not, even something like semiconductors is closer to low level work in the US compared to other countries. For example, when TSM built their factory in Arizona, one of their grievances was that there is no local talent, and they had to import a lot of talent from Taiwan for a while to train people locally. They also wanted an agreement about getting some specialties into U.S. colleges to be able to train local workers, and there simply wasn't enough there weren't enough workers for them to actually use at that location. And what happens now? First policy is deportations. So deportations is destroying the amount of low level work in the US, like for example, working in agriculture. Plus, the job market is local. Now that we have cutting government spending from Elon, uh, that doesn't mean that the market will be balanced. If you destroy all the low-level workers by deporting them, and then you cut government spending and cut government employees, which are mid-level work towards high-level work, that doesn't mean they will be able to do the low-level work from the workers you deported. On top of this, the job market is local, like I said. So, for example, if workers in Ohio that are agriculture workers are gone, that doesn't mean that, I don't know, bureaucrats in Washington can replace them. They're very far away, and you have to match the demand with skill set and the location, not just abstract demand. So the US is destroying the low-level work which they import uh, which they import from other countries, like immigrants, which also happens in Europe, happens in all developed countries at some point, because the local population becomes unwilling to do the low-level work, and then immigrants came in and replaced those people. Now, this is the base of the pyramid stuff, like food production, which is inflationary and not good for the US. Secondly, for government spending, uh, so I'll make a parallel with QE here. How QE works is that QE is quantitative easing. The central bank buys bonds that the state emits and holds them on the balance sheet. They buy unlimitedly because they print money to do so, and it's a quote unquote win-win. But there are two types of QE. One is good QE, the other is bad QE. One is inflationary, the other is not inflationary. The intent with QE when it was first invented and done was to stimulate production. So let's say the central bank buys bonds from a bank. The bank initially buys the bonds from the treasury, but then the central bank does buybacks like the Fed used to do. They used to do like 120 billion per month, and they buy the bonds back from the bank. The bank gets the money. What does the bank do with the money? If they invest in something that brings value, like production, like a new factory, like small businesses, and so on, that is deflationary QE, that is good QE, because the money is spent on improving production, improving the economy. That money eventually, let's say it goes into a factory or in a small business, that small business eventually maybe generates revenue that is good for the economy. And it's good for the economy even if the business fails, because now you have a business creator which still needs to live and will try their best to re-become productive. The second option is the bad QE. The bad QE is inflationary. And bad QE is when you take the money from QE and you buy assets. All that does is inflate asset prices. That those assets can be stocks, they can be homes, they can be, I don't know, vacations. Like let's say you take a loan from the bank, and instead of, I don't know, starting a small business, you go on vacation with that money, or you try to maintain a lavish lifestyle with that money. That is the equivalent of bad QE, because all you're doing is consumption. You are taking but not giving back into the economy. You're just taking, you're just consumption. So that is bad QE. Why this parallel? Because I think under the Biden administration, we had a very good balance between good QE and bad QE. Not that it was QE, but the government plays a large part in maintaining liquidity in the economy. And they do so if they want to stimulate consumption, for example, they give money away, like the pandemic response. Or they increase salaries for government workers, or they hire more government workers. But they can also do something productive, like invest in infrastructure, uh, give businesses a lot of money, and so on. So I think the Biden administration had a very good balance of that, and this is why the economy grew a lot during the Biden administration. It wasn't more outperformance, it was outspending because they did this with record deficits, but at least they grew. Like for example, in my country, we're running huge deficits, but very feeble growth. So because it was election season, they increased pensions, they increased salaries for government workers. So it was the bad kind of government spending, not the good kind in infrastructure. We also did infrastructure, but a lot less than election freebies. So getting to this here is that now that Elon is cutting like fucking crazy, he's breaking the balance. And if the government stops spending, all hell will break loose in the US because it was holding the economy up. And now that he's cutting jobs, plus cutting spending, plus all that bullshit he's been doing and posting about, that's a really, 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 really bad sign about what's to come in the US. Because if the government stops spending, a recession is inevitable. And I'm not talking 6 months from now, 1 year from now. I'm talking because the cuts were so brutal. I'm talking like within 3 months. If we will start seeing this impact of the government not spending. Like for example, just last night he posted that the government will stop paying contractors for until he checks what they're paying for, something like this. And this brings us to the final point here on the policy side with the tariffs. Now, who pays for tariffs between the importer and the exporter? Let's say, and the answer is the importer pays for the tariffs. But that doesn't mean it doesn't affect the exporter as well. Because, for example, a business in Canada creates a good and it ships it to the US. The one who pays for the tariffs is the US importer. And they don't want to lose money, so they will try to raise prices to uh, to get the consumer to pay for it. But given we've had record inflation in the past couple of years, the consumer is kind of tapped out. Not necessarily money-wise, but psychologically for sure. They hate inflation like crazy, and they will not accept something like a 25 price increase, 25%. So the importer will also have to take a hit on their margins and not raise prices that much because the consumer would not like it. But that affects the business. So maybe the big companies like Coca-Cola can support this. They can even open up local factories in every country. I'm not worried about those guys that much, even though those will get hit as well on the margins. But I'm talking like small and mid-level businesses, 500, no, 50, 20 employees to 1,000, let's say, but maybe a bit less, that will not be able to do something like this. And on the other side, it also hurts the exporter, in this case, the Canadian business, because maybe now the importer will reduce their orders. Maybe they stop importing at all because they don't like the tariffs. Maybe they try to source it locally, or they try to source it from a country that doesn't have tariffs imposed on them right now. So it's a lose-lose in my opinion. On top of this, the political impact is horrible. This is not just tariffs. What it is an attack from an ally on a different ally. And I like to compare it to Russia attacking Ukraine. But that was kind of a known issue. Like we weren't looking at Russia as a friend. Maybe like a marriage of necessity, something like that. Because we were importing a lot of energy and gas from them. But now it wasn't like Russia Ukraine. It wasn't like that. It was US and Canada, like two of the closest country you can think of between any two countries in the world. Like this is absolutely bonkers that they impose tariffs on Canada, and they will do so on the US EU as well. The political impact and the social impact will be immediate. Like they will start boycotting of US products. There will be a lot of hate on the US in the world. Uh, and again, I'll compare it to Russia or Ukraine. I've met a lot of Russian people. I like Russian people a lot. I hate Putin's Russia. It will be kind of the same like this. I've met a lot of American people. I like American people in general, but I will hate Trump's America. It will be the same as with Russia. America is on a path to become the new Russia from a political perspective. And this time is even worse because when Russia attacked, it was unprecedented. It was something that we didn't really expect. But now that precedent has been broken, and Trump keeps threatening like 51st state Canada, I'll take Greenland, I'll take the Panama Canal, that fear will not just be hypothetical in people's minds. Because it happened with Russia, now people will fear the US a lot more. And we will start treating it just like we treated Russia before the war, meaning a marriage of necessity. But we will be a lot more cautious and wary of what Trump does and the US does. And this will drive other countries towards different sources of trade. Like we will trade a lot less with the US, Canada will trade a lot less with the US. We will likely increase trade between the US, the Europe and Canada, and so on. So the US will get more shunned and shunned and shunned. Like tourists will less tourists, less trade with the US. US will have less low level workers. Like they don't want immigration. Now immigrants will want to go to the US because they'll be afraid. And that means the US will have workers. All that manufacturing renaissance that Trump is talking about is all bullshit because you don't have the people to do it, you don't have the schools to train people to do those jobs, and the people themselves don't want to do those jobs. So it's all fucked up, and thank you, Trump. Finally, let's look at markets. So I think we have everything down, obviously, but it's recovering a bit. And I had this for QQQ. Let me put it on. Oh, this is fine. Now, the market is tantruming. This is very good because if there's a chance that we get away from this shit is if the market tantrums and Trump backs down. Let's look at yields first. And yields are saying one thing, two things actually. First, the 2 year spiked. The short end of the curve is spiking. This means inflation fears. But as you can see, the long end of the curve is not spiking. It's actually flattish down, which is surprising. But this means growth fears. So what the market thinks right now, you can see from the yield curve and the yields at themselves, is they think inflation will spike short term, but long term is going to be bad and potentially recession or less growth for sure. What we should be seeing in the next couple of days from yields is a reinversion of the yields, meaning the 2 year goes above the 10 year. Uh, this can happen, they meet in the middle somewhere. So I would expect the long end of the curve to be slightly down, flat, and the 2 year to go up until it gets to the same level as the 10 year. So we should get a reinversion. But that is only if markets don't drop. And going back to markets, I posted on Friday that we have a couple of paths ahead of us depending on tariffs. If we didn't get tariffs, we should have gotten a move up. This is no longer happening, but we did get tariffs, and we are dumping, and the market is tantruming. I think we have a window until Feb OPEX, meaning the next 3 weeks. Feb OPEX is here, in which the market can go down niche last slash sideways as low as 10%. If we don't have de-escalation by Feb OPEX, I think all hell can break loose, meaning we can do continuation down, we can even do a flash crash. I don't think this is plausible either right now. Uh, this is not like this. So now we're basically here. We are at this level at the yearly open. I think we can have a bounce at this level, but it's going to be more like this. I think we're going to the, come on, delete it. We're going to the range lows again. And this time there is real fear that we go lower. And if we get tariffs on the EU as well, I think we get a breakdown and we do minus 10%. I'll switch to 4 hour. So something like this. So tariffs on the EU for me is minus 10%. And this should happen within the next 3 weeks. And I think Trump will not back down because he's an idiot. The plan that Bassett came with 2.5% tariffs globally and then increases every month is much better. First of all, it gives time for people to adapt. Secondly, it's not a shock because only 2.5%, and thirdly, it opens up negotiations much better without shocking anyone. So that would have been a much better plan. And now we get 10%, which is 540-ish. But if by Feb OPEX we do not get the escalation, I think we continue down and we do a next leg. And the next leg is probably the top from 2021. This is the support 20%. It could get even lower than this. It depends on what Trump does. If again there is no de-escalation, I think we go even lower. We shall see. But what is happening right now will lead to a recession because of the policies. What is happening right now will lead to a market tantrum. And unless he backs down, I don't think this can be stopped. It's pretty fucked up. Short term until the 21st, which is, let's put 21st. 21st is here. So until the 21st, things are relatively uncertain. Like I think we can bounce here, we can go back up, we can. It's a very small range, so we can have a breakdown and do basically what I think the range is between the now and the 21st is this range, and we can go up and down. Like we can go for here for a while. We can, but eventually, if we are on the 21st and we are here and we haven't resolved things, I think we start to decline a much bigger decline, and we go all the way to the 20% threshold. So yeah, this is my view on the market for now. It's pretty bleak, but when idiots are in charge and they implement their idiotic policies, bad things happen. Stay safe. Have a good one. Bye bye.